Hello, and welcome to Series 7 of the International Soccer Podcast. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. In this six-part series, we will be doing a group-by-group preview of African Cup 2021. And today we'll be looking at Group C, which is Morocco, Ghana, Gabon, and Comoros.
Right, and we're going to break this podcast into three parts. So we'll begin with an overview of the group. That means basically looking at where the country is in Africa and the size of each country and its population. Part two is by far the longest part. It's a team by team overview. So for each team, we'll be looking at their long history in the World Cup and African Cup, and kind of a special segment on their performance in the African Cup finals. So a bit of a deep dive there, because that's what we're dealing with, is the African Cup finals. We'll take a look at their recent history and their qualifying record for this cup, and a brief overview of their players. And finally, in part three, a discussion of their prospects and our predictions. So we'll be looking at their rankings, the odds that are given them, the head-to-head records, and a discussion of their prospects.
Right, so this is called the 2021 African Cup, even though it's being played in 2022, having been delayed because of COVID. Cameroon is a host country, and there are 24 teams competing. This is the second edition with 24 teams, having been expanded from 16. With 24 teams starting in 2019. The top two teams in each of the six groups advance, along with the four top third-place finishers. And then in terms of the qualifying structure, there was a preliminary round to reduce the 52 participants to 48, and then the 48 teams were then divided into 12 groups of four, with the top two from each group qualifying for the African Cup.
Great. Okay, so we're going to start with part one, which is an overview looking at the countries themselves. So let's start with Morocco.
All right. So Morocco is a country on the Mediterranean and Atlantic waters of Northwest Africa, just across from Spain. Morocco, in terms of its size, is about 450,000 square kilometers. That's just including Morocco. If you include Western Sahara, which Morocco does in its area, then it's just over 700,000 square kilometers. Without getting into the politics, we're going to stick with the initial number, the 450,000. That's 26th largest in Africa, and makes Morocco similar in size to Sweden, or a bit larger than California. And in terms of population, there's 37 million people. So it's the 11th most populated country in Africa, and actually has a population roughly the same as Canada.
Okay, great. Let's move on to Ghana.
All right. Ghana is a small country that sits on the Atlantic Ocean in Western Africa. Its size is about 240,000 square kilometers, which is very similar in size to the United Kingdom, and that's 32nd largest out of 54 countries in Africa. And its population is 31 million, which is 13th largest in the continent.
Super. Okay, next team is Gabon.
Gabon is another West African country that's on the Atlantic Ocean. In terms of size, it's about 270,000 square kilometers. It's actually a little bit larger than Ghana, and roughly the same size as New Zealand. Its population is 2.2 million, which is 44th in Africa, or the 11th smallest. So it's a relatively small population for its size. Comparing it to Ghana, it's slightly larger in area, as I said, but has less than 10% of the population.
Okay, and finally, Comoros.
So Comoros is a chain of islands off Africa's east coast, between Mozambique and Madagascar. It has, in terms of size, it's just under 2,000 square kilometers, which is the 52nd largest or third smallest country in Africa. It's also the smallest nation by area competing in the African Cup. And its In terms of size, it's a little bit smaller than the city-state of Hong Kong. In terms of population, there's about 800,000 people that live in Comoros. So it's the fourth smallest country in Africa. It's actually not the smallest nation competing at this tournament, though. The smallest country there is Cape Verde, which is the third smallest at about 500,000 people. So Comoros is just slightly larger.
Okay, well, that's good information. And we're going to kind of put it all together here with a little bit of a comparison of the four nations.
Yeah, so Morocco is the largest in terms of area and population. It has 37 million people. Ghana has 31 million people, so not too far behind. Then it drops off to Gabon with just 2.2 million people, so a relatively small country in terms of population, that is, in Africa. And then finally, we have tiny Comoros with less than 1 million people.
Great. All right, well then let's move on to the team by team discussion, and we're going to begin with Morocco. Do they have a nickname, Connor?
They do. Their nickname is the Atlas Lions.
Okay, great. And their home jersey is usually red with splashes of green, and their away jersey is the opposite, green with splashes of red. And we'll begin by looking at their participation and achievements, so kind of a broad view. They began qualifying in 1962 for the World Cup after joining, and after joining the General African Boycott in 1966, they participated consistently from 1970. African Cup participation got off to a rocky start, withdrawing in 1962, joining their first in 1963, but then not entering 3 of the 5 subsequent tournaments and only participating consistently from 1976. They were disqualified in 2015 because they withdrew from hosting. Their local group is UNAF, the Union of North African Football, but it doesn't have a tournament for the senior men's team. They are, however, part of the Arab Nations Cup. They didn't participate in early editions of this from 1963 to 1992, but they have participated in all 4 editions since 1998. In terms of achievement, they've reached the World Cup 5 times. A round of 16 finish in 1986 is their best result, and otherwise they haven't passed the group stage. They won their only African Cup in 1976 and have finished in the top 4 times. Their best result in the Arab Cup was a title win in 2012. So we'll move on to a kind of a closer look at their World Cup history. And they reached the World Cup in 1970, in 1986, and twice in a row in 1994 and 1998. And then there was a long gap until they finally reached it again in 2018. They came very close on their first try, beating out Tunisia on a coin toss, and then Ghana. And that only took them to an intercontinental playoff where they lost both legs to Spain. And that was as close as any African or Asian team came to the Cup. And it kind of sheds light on why those 2 confederations boycotted the following Cup, feeling like they had little chance of getting there. That boycott worked to guarantee Africa 1 place among the 16 teams in the 1970 World Cup. And Morocco took that spot in their second qualification campaign in 1970. It took until 1986, 4 cups later, to succeed again, and there they passed the group stage for their best finish ever. A terrible qualifying campaign in 1990 saw them finish at the bottom of the group in round 1 of 2, but they finished the next 2 cups with only 1 loss over their they reached the next 2 cups with only 1 loss over their 2 qualifying campaigns. They fell just short in the following 2 cups, but then fell off after that, finishing last in the final round in 2010 and not even reaching the final round in 2014. So we're going to take a closer look at the two cups since then to see how they fared.
All right, so starting with the 2018 World Cup in Russia, Morocco was one of the 27 top-ranked teams in Africa to receive a bye in round 1 of 3. In their round 2 pairing, they beat Equatorial Guinea in the first leg at home, but made hard work of it in the second, losing but by a small enough margin to see them advancing on goal difference. They then went undefeated in round 3, which was a group stage. They bested Mali and Gabon, but seemed unlikely as they went into their last game in Ivory Coast, having already tied them at home. Against expectations, they won the game, and as a result, topped the group to reach their first World Cup since 1998. Once there, a goal deep into injury time, an own goal in fact, saw them lose their opener against Iran, and they were out after losing to Portugal in their second match. However, they almost beat Spain in their final match, which was representative of their good performance, but they suffered a draw on another late goal, which kind of summarized their bad luck, and they ended up finishing last in the group stage.
Right, I believe that goal was disallowed by the officials and then kind of reallowed by VAR.
Right, yeah, I don't remember all the details, but I know they were super close to beating Spain. That game finished 2-2, and of course it was a real heartbreaker in their opener against Iran, just an unlucky deflection.
Yeah, so really a good campaign, but a good performance, but not a very good result. All right, let's move on to 2022 qualifying.
All right, so Morocco received a bye in round 1 of 3, which is just a preliminary round. In the group stage, they won all games over Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, and Sudan to finish a distant first in what was a second round of qualifying. They were imperious, and the campaign was uneventful in terms of games, but they did travel to Guinea for a match only to find themselves waking up the next day to gunfire in the streets and civil war. So a little bit eventful off the field.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, they await the third round then. That hasn't been decided yet. Apparently, the draw is on January 26th. So that's a single knockout home and away with one of the other top finishers in the round 2 qualifying. So we'll move on to their African Cup history here, and we'll start with an overview before we go into a deep dive. Morocco didn't get down to business as quickly in the African Cup. After coming close in 1963, it took until 1972 to reach their first cup, and there they were knocked out in the group stage. On their second entry in 1976, however, they won the title. It would prove to be their only title, though. They finished third in 1980 and fourth in both 1986 and 1988 as hosts in 1988. Between those finishes, though, they failed to qualify for the Cup in 1982 and 1984, and also 3 out of 4 times after hosting in 1988. From 1998 onward, though, they regularly qualified, failing only once again in 2010, although they were disqualified in 2015. In 1998, they reached the quarterfinals, and 2002 saw them finish second. Otherwise, they were knocked out at the group stage in 5 of 8 tournaments between 1998 and 2013. So we would expect them to reach the recent cups, which Connor will cover shortly. But first, though, let's take a deeper dive into their history at the African Cup finals. Okay, so 1970, as we said, was their first successful 1972 was their first qualification, and they did well to get there, beating Algeria and Egypt in separate knockout rounds. They earned 3 draws in the group stage and finished tied on points with Congo. The tiebreaker, Connor, do you know what the tiebreaker is around that time?
Well, is it drawing lots? We saw that in our last podcast.
Yes, it was the unimaginative drawing of lots. And unfortunately, they lost and Congo advanced. That moves us to 1976. The Cup was in Ethiopia, and that turned out to be their only title win. It was a solid but fairly unremarkable campaign. It featured 2 group stages rather than the usual pattern, and they won 2 games and tied 1 in each case. That included actually wins over Nigeria in both group phases, but it was host Nigeria who condemned them to 3rd place in 1980, knocking them out at the semi-final stage. After 2 failures to qualify, top 4 finishes resumed in 1986 and when they hosted in 1988, but it's actually less impressive than it sounds. The group stages were impressive, going undefeated against the top opposition, but they lost all games in the semi-finals and 3rd place matches. No quarterfinals existed at that time. So, in short, they didn't win any games after group stages, but still finished 4th. And in fact, that would be the last of their top 4 finishes, apart from 2004, where they finished 2nd. Suffering only 1 draw in 6 games of qualifying, they suffered only 1 draw in the group stage too. The quarterfinal ended excitingly there in 2004. Algeria scored the first goal of the game at 84, but Morocco leveled 4 minutes into injury time. And then Morocco scored twice in extra time to advance to the final. To advance to the semi-final. There they crushed Mali 4-0 to reach the final, where they lost to host and kind of local rival Tunisia. It was unremarkable group stage knockouts after that. Let's see if after being disqualified in 2015, if they've managed to make it beyond the group stage, having last done so only in 2004.
All right, so we'll start with the 2017 campaign. They came into qualification as the Pot 2 team, perhaps surprisingly behind Cape Verde, but proved vastly superior, suffering only a single draw. This occurred against Libya in the ostensibly neutral ground of Tunisia. In the finals, things got off to a poor start when they lost to Congo DR, but they beat Togo and stepped into a void left by a lackluster Ivory Coast, beating them to take 2nd place in the group stage. So they did get out of the group there, but they lost to Egypt in the quarterfinal on a late goal.
All right, how about 2019?
In 2019, Morocco finished 1st in their qualifying group, ahead on goal difference of Cameroon. They actually won all their home games there, but they were winless on the road, losing to Cameroon and tying Comoros, who they meet here, and Malawi. At the tournament, they were a bit unconvincing in the group stage, eking out wins over Namibia and South Africa, only on last-minute single goals. But they did well to beat Ivory Coast and finish 1st in the group stage with maximum points. Somewhat shamefully, they lost to Benin on penalties in the round of 16, despite being given a late penalty and having a man advantage. So
Wow.
A disappointing end to that tournament.
Yeah, so they did pass the group stage in both cases, but only 1 step beyond there. And where do we go now?
Why don't you talk about their local cup and involvements?
Right. Okay, thanks. Yeah, we won't talk much about their local group, which is UNAF, or the Union of North African Football. The group has only 5 members. That's Northern African teams: Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. The reason we won't talk about it is because there's no senior men's cup, as there is in most sub-regional groups here. UNAF seems to focus more on youth and women's competition. Morocco is, however, involved in the Arab Cup. They didn't take part in any of the 6 editions between 1963 and 1992. However, they joined from 1998 and won one of the 4 editions in 2012. This is actually becoming a bigger tournament now. The most recent one in 2021 was taken over by FIFA, and there they reached the quarterfinals. We're actually going to look a bit more closely at those games in the recent game section, because it just took place in late November and early December. All right, so let's do a quick summary of Morocco, can we, Connor?
All right, so the 1976 African Cup win does not coincide with good results in the World Cup. After their impressive 1986 World Cup campaign, their 1986 World Cup campaign roughly coincides with 2 fourth place finishes in a row at the African Cup in 1986 and 1988. This really has to be considered their peak, although we have seen 4th place, especially as hosts, is not much of an achievement. In truth, the peaks are more like rolling hills, and other than the 2nd place in the 2004 African Cup, recently they've been more of a valley.
Right, and this valley hit bottom in 2014 and 15 when they failed to reach the final round of World Cup qualifying for the first time since 1990, and also were disqualified from the 2015 African Cup. They came back, though, passing the group stage of the African Cup twice in a row in 2017 and 2019, and as Connor described, also reaching the World Cup in 2018. So they look to be kind of coming out of that valley. Let's see how they looked coming into this cup.
So they started their qualifying campaign rather weakly with a home draw against Mauritania, and actually tied them away as well. But otherwise, they beat Central African Republic and Burundi twice to comfortably finish first in their qualifying group. So no real problems getting to this cup.
True, but I would say a decidedly easy group there.
I would agree with you there.
All right. Well, we're normally skipping recent matches because they tend to be, for most teams, World Cup qualifiers, which we've already covered. But in the case of Morocco, we have the Arab Cup. Do you want to just talk about those 4 games, Connor?
Yeah, so Morocco did play 4 games in the Arab Cup. So they started with a convincing win over Palestine 4-0, and an equally convincing win over Jordan, as well as a win over Saudi Arabia, probably their toughest game up to that point. However, they met Algeria in the next round, and they tied 2-2, but lost 5-3 in penalties.
Yeah, the Arab Cup is kind of an interesting way of comparing, some of the Asian Confederation teams with the African Confederation. So it looks like Morocco got the better of Saudi Arabia there. Otherwise, I'd kind of see them as fairly even. All right, let's move on to talk a little bit about players. And I'm just going to go through some of the players that have scored. We'll start the discussion with looking at the scorers in 2021 African Cup qualifying and 2022 World Cup qualifying. So for 2021, it was Hakim Ziyech, who plays for Chelsea, scoring 3 of the goals, and Ashraf Hakimi and Youssef El Nesri getting 2 goals each. And the other 3 goals were scored by 3 individual scorers. In 2022, they scored a lot of goals, and it was a different name, Ayoub El Kabi, getting 5 of them. And then one of 2 new brothers who I'm quite interested in. I'm not sure how to say the name. It's spelled Mmaee. Any guess on that, Connor?
Not really. Yours is as good as mine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll go with May, but I'll probably find out during the cup how to actually say it, because as I said, he has a brother. He scored two pairs of goals, one of them on a penalty, and then two scorers: Salim Amala with two goals, and Imran Louza with two goals, one of which was on a penalty, and then five or six players scoring single goals, including Ashraf Hakimi again, who I think is a defender, and Sofiane Boufal, who is, I think, familiar um, to Premier League watchers. So those are the scorers. Do you have any other players to talk about, Connor?
Yeah, Morocco has a couple big names playing at fairly big clubs. You mentioned several. Ashraf Hakimi with Paris Saint Germain. Um, uh, Up front, Youssef El Nesri. He plays for Sevilla and is quite prolific for them. They also have a couple players at Watford, Imran Louza, who you mentioned, as well as Adam Messina. So they both play for Watford in the Premier League. And then a real anchor at the back, and actually their captain is Roman Saiz, who plays for Wolverhampton.
Right. Okay. That was a good run through. I should add one thing, though, that um, Hakim Ziyech is not on the team. Do you know anything about that? He's not on the published roster.
Yeah, quite a notable absence for them, and it appears that he's had a kind of a falling out with the coach of the Moroccan team, Vahid Halahodzic. Um, the Chelsea winger actually was overlooked for the six World Cup qualifiers played at the end of 2021, so he wasn't
Mm.
part of the team there, and his I guess omission in the African Cup is kind of a continuation there. So yeah, as far as I can tell, just um, a falling out with the manager, but I'm sure he'll be missed by Moroccan fans because he's certainly an influential player.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So we're gonna our feature player. I gotta say, the reason I've chosen Sofiane Amrabat is really because I like him, and B, because I'm going to apply a bit of a brothers theme through the players this time. So, can you tell us a bit about Sofiane Amrabat?
Yeah, he wasn't mentioned among the goal scorers because he actually hasn't scored for the national team, but he is a midfielder, a little bit versatile, but often central midfield. He does have 27 caps for the team, and he's been with them since 2017. Currently, he plays for Fiorentina in Italy, where he's been since 2020. And prior to that, he spent some time in Belgium with Club Bruges and with Feyenoord and Utrecht in the Netherlands. So he's been at some pretty big clubs in a short career so far.
Yeah, that's right. He was actually born in Belgium. I actually am kind of questioning my choice of him now because he really hasn't played that much for Morocco. He appeared only in game one in the 2018 World Cup, and then he kind of disappeared. He was replaced actually by his brother, but he has played nine of their 10 games in the lead up to this cup. So he looks like he'll definitely be a starter here. Just one more point before we go, unless you have anything to say, Connor.
Well, we'll just mention that his brother is Nordin Amrabat, um, and he is Norden is 9 years older than Sofiane, and you may remember Norden Amrabat from the 2018 World Cup. He started all three games and was really fabulous for Morocco in their three games.
Oh, I wonder if I got the two mixed up. Anyway, Norden is off the team it seems now because he hasn't played since 2019, which actually leads into my into my final point. Like a lot of their players, like Norden Amrabat, are no longer on the team. Either they're kind of in limbo. We don't really know if they're off the team, having played like in November 2019 last, or whether they've officially retired, like some of the players I'll mention. So Nabil Dirar has 48 caps for the team, but last played in 2019. Yunus Belhandi also last played in the African Cup. He has 58 caps. A lot of them are still playing for their club teams. Maybe the biggest miss here is former captain Mehdi Benatia, and he hasn't played since the 2019 African Cup either. He was with Juventus and Bayern Munich. And finally, Mbark Boussoufa with 70 caps, last played in 2019. So quite a few players off the team. It looks like they'll be doing a bit of rebuilding here, Connor.
Yeah, perhaps getting a bit younger. I think it's good for teams to refresh. Teams get into problem if they rely on older players for too long. So yeah, they do have a number of younger players in their squad. Some attached to bigger clubs, as we mentioned. So I think they'll be an exciting team.
Yeah, actually, having said that, we did say they were kind of flat before 2017, and they've been looking a bit fresher in the last two qualifications. So maybe it's a change for the better. But we'd better move on to our next team, which is Ghana. And do we have a nickname for them, Connor?
Yeah, Ghana are known as the Black Stars, which is a reference to their flag with a single black star in the middle of it. And they wear white kits, and with a backup, currently looks like it's yellow and black.
Yeah, I'm never sure about these kit things. You never really know until the tournament, or maybe I'm just looking at the wrong sources. But as far as I know, it is. I think they're the only ones with a white home kit.
Yeah, and they've had.
Okay, well, sorry.
I'm just gonna say, yeah, their white kit is very distinctive. They've been white for quite a long time.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, let's begin by a look at their participation and achievements. So, their first international game was in 1950. They were called the Gold Coast then. Of course, they've changed their name to Ghana since. They first entered World Cup qualification in 1962, but withdrew from the next edition as part of that general African Asian boycott. They also withdrew in 1982, but otherwise have participated consistently. 1962 was also the year that they first entered the African Cup, and they've never missed any editions of that. Their local group is WAFU, the West African Football Union. There have only been 5 editions of the first completed WAFU Cup in 2010, and they've entered them all except for the 2015 edition, which most teams missed. In terms of achievement, we're going to actually start with African Cup play. They were a powerhouse early on, winning 2 cups in a row in 1963 and 1965, and going on to win 4 titles in all. Beyond that, they have a plethora of top 4 finishes. Given that, Ghana was slow to reach the World Cup. Their first World Cup qualification was in 2006. However, they did reach 3 in a row from that time, and their best performance was a quarterfinal finish in 2010, when the cup was in South Africa. So they were the best African performing team there. They won 2 of the 5 WAFU Cups, more than any other West African nation there, and those were in 2013 and 2017. So let's take an overview of the World Cup. Oh, hang on, I'll get to my spot. Ghana was Ghana's first entry into World Cup competition in 1962 saw them come close to reaching the Cup, or at least close to that intercontinental playoff with Spain, which we discussed, and Morocco. After that, though, they disappeared from contention, twice falling at the earliest stage and even withdrawing from the competition in 1982. And they didn't come close again until their first successful qualification in 2006, which is most surprising given their African Cup record. However, they made the finals the next three times in a row, as we said, and they performed well on top of it, undone by bad luck more than endeavor. In 2006 and 2014, both times they were in a group of death, and they even advanced from it in 2006. In 2010, they came within a moment of reaching the semi-final. Connor, do you remember?
Yeah, they were undone by a bit of trickery, if we can call it that, by Uruguay, and in particular striker Luis Suarez. He, of course, handled a goal-bound effort on the line in the dying moments, and Ghana missed the resulting penalty. So they could have become the first ever African team to reach the semifinals, but alas, they were defeated and went out at the quarterfinal stage.
Yeah, tragic. Anyway, it's over to you to see how they've done over their last two campaigns. Did they keep that streak going?
So in 2018, they avoided the preliminary round one of three, as they were one of the top 27 teams in Africa. In the round two pairing, they were paired with Comoros, who they meet in this group. They actually tied Comoros away, but they won at home to advance. In the group stage, they got off to a poor start, tying Uganda at home. And when they tied them away in the second last game, it was all over. They were bested by group winners Egypt. They also tied Congo at home, who they crushed in the away leg for their only win of the round. So, in summary, Egypt won the group, Uganda finished second, and Ghana third. So they weren't. They were 6 points off first place, so did not advance to the World Cup.
Right, they didn't make four World Cups in a row, and that's pretty poor. Three ties at home, I would say.
Yeah, failing to win at home when home home advantage used is quite significant in Africa.
Yeah. All right, on to the 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign then.
So they received a bye in round one of three, a preliminary round. They then won all home games in the group stage, but beat only Zimbabwe on the road, losing on a late goal in South Africa and tying Ethiopia. The last game saw them beating South Africa at home, but on a very soft penalty, and actually had South Africa openly calling it match fixing because of that penalty decision, as well as others during the game. Uh, they tried to appeal to FIFA to have the game replayed, but that appeal was turned down.
Mm-hmm.
So the result stood, and it saw Ghana leapfrog South Africa, tying them on points and goal difference. But on the basis of more goals scored, they finished first in the group stage, round two of three. That puts them into the final stage, which is a home and away playoff, and their opponent has yet to be determined.
Right. Did you happen to see that penalty decision against South Africa?
No, I didn't. Did you have a look at it?
Oh yeah, you got to watch the video. I don't know about their claim, especially in the first half, about the referee favoring Ghana, because I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did see that penalty decision, and it was kind of unbelievably soft, actually. But we'll move on to the African Cup history here. And as usual, we'll do an overview followed by a bit of a deep dive into the African Cup finals. So, in overview, their poor World Cup record until 2006, as we've said, is a bit mystifying in light of their African Cup record. They failed to qualify in their first entry in 1962, but they won the following two cups and then came second in the two cups after that. In doing so, they blazed a trail for Western African teams, indeed sub-Saharan teams, into the African Cup. But their record would blow quite hot and cold over their history. Yes, after those two wins, two second place finishes, they failed to qualify for the next three times. But they did win the tournament two more times in 1978 and 1962. Otherwise, if we look at the period, the whole period between 1972 and 1992, other than those 2 tournament wins, they were knocked out at the group stage twice and didn't reach the tournament at all 6 times. So pretty hot and cold. From 1992, where they took second place, they have become consistent, not only reaching the cup but passing the group stage. They failed to qualify only once in 2004 and fell at the group stage only twice in 1998 and 2006, the latter being the year of their first World Cup qualification there. From 2008, they've done particularly well, finishing in the top 4 6 times in a row. However, since 1982, another title has eluded them. So we're kind of going to look at those 2 periods, that early period and the recent period. In the early period, 1963, the number of African teams competing was quite small. Being a host also is a big advantage, giving them automatic qualification. And in fact, they only required 3 games to win the title: a tie with Tunisia, a win over Ethiopia in the group stage, and then a win over Sudan in the final. And 1965 was similar, as they qualified automatically as returning champions. The 3-game run, though, was more impressive, as they beat both Congo Kinshasa, that's Congo DR now, and Ivory Coast by 3-goal margins in the group stage. And then they beat tournament host Tunisia in the final, winning in extra time there. Tournaments became increasingly more competitive as more teams joined, but they did reach the final twice more in 1968 and 1970, and they went out to Congo Kinshasa and Sudan respectively. And that pretty much ended their strong early period. And we've seen the trends of hot and cold in the overview. 1992 was a brief peak in that period, as they won all of their games, but then lost in the final on penalties, 11-10 to Ivory Coast. But the next period of consistent strength began in 2008, hosting once again, which jump-started a good period. They did well in qualifying, in group stages and in quarterfinals, to reach the semifinals 6 times in a row. But as we've said, a further title eluded them. They made the final twice, losing on a late goal at 85 minutes to Egypt in 2010, and losing once again in a dramatic penalty shootout with Ivory Coast in 2015. There, they gave up an advantage gained by Ivory Coast having missed their first 2 penalty shots, and they eventually lost 9-8.
Wow, two dramatic finals with tons of penalty shooters to Ivory Coast. Both games going 0-0 after 120 minutes. So yeah, really dramatic. History kind of repeating itself.
Yeah, I think Ivory Coast must be famous for those penalty shootouts, because they had a really long one against Cameroon in 2006 too.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll talk about Ghana's last 2 tournaments, starting with 2017. There they had a pretty convincing qualification, going undefeated and finishing first in the group. It was hardly a stern test, though, with Mozambique and Rwanda being the biggest threats, and they tied each of them, including Rwanda, at home. Nevertheless, they got twice as many points as both of those teams, and Mauritius was the other team in the group. At the tournament, they beat Uganda and Mali, but lost to a defensive Egypt, an equally defensive Egypt, actually, Ghana having not conceded up until that point. And Ghana finished second in the group stage. After that, they beat a well-performing Congo DR in the quarterfinal, but then lost to an unexpectedly strong Cameroon in the semifinal. That set up a third, fourth place match with Burkina Faso, which they lost. So it was kind of a disappointing result for them in the end.
Yeah, Ghana tends to lose whenever they're in a third place match. They just don't seem to care very much about them. Okay, on to the African Cup 2019 then.
Yeah, so in qualifying, Ghana lost in Kenya, or lost, yeah, sorry, lost in Kenya early in the campaign, but they proved more consistent against Ethiopia, beating them twice. And then they took first place in the group by beating Kenya in their final game. Sierra Leone was also in the group, but were disqualified during the campaign. At the African Cup, they tied Benin in their opener, then Cameroon, before beating Guinea-Bissau to take first in the group stage. Then they lost in the round of 16, benefiting first from a late own goal by Tunisia, but then losing to them in the resulting penalty shootout. So a kind of a surprisingly early exit for them at the last tournament.
Yeah, that's right. I gotta say, having won the group stage, they were a bit unlucky to meet a strong team like Tunisia in the round of 16. Okay, let's move on to a bit of their local history here. And they're a member of WAFU, the West African Football Union. Um, just a moment here, Connor. Uh, okay, yeah. And actually, the WAFU is a pretty big region. It's divided into 18 teams, and they've divided those teams into two zones. Zone A is called Niger, and it's, or Niger, I believe you pronounce it. And that's made up of 9 teams who we won't cover here. And Zone B is made up of a region called Volta, Niger, and that has Benin, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Niger, Nigeria, and Togo. So it's actually probably one of the strongest local groups in Africa. And there have been 6 editions of the most recent form of the local tournament from 2010 until 2019, with another that was scheduled for 2021, but it seems to have been cancelled. Ghana is a dominant member and have won 2 of the 5 WAFU Cups, more than any other country. These were in 2013 and 2017. So let's move to a summary of Ghana. Do you want to take us through it, Connor?
Sure. Well, the most outstanding feature for Ghana is the disparity between their World Cup performances and African Cup play. They seemed almost feeble in World Cup play up until 2006, but they'd won 4 African Cup titles during that period. 2006 to 10 was a strong period in the World Cup, but they were unremarkable in the African Cup at that same time. But just as their World Cup success was winding down, they looked a top team in African Cup play in the mid 2010s. Also notable is their yo-yo performances in African Cup play from 1963 until 1992, where, for the most part, they either reached the final or else did not qualify.
Yeah, they're really extremes there. So, looking at their recent history, a strong period ended in 2017. 2018 saw them fail to reach the cup for the first time since 2002. And 2019 ended a run of 6 top 4 finishes as they reached only the round of 16. They have dropped from a peak of 26th in FIFA rankings. That's where they were in the mid 2010, down to around 50 after 2017. They actually haven't really declined further since 2017 in their rankings, though, and it may be too soon to write them off as an African power. Okay, let's take a look at their recent history and their qualifying for this cup.
Sure, so in terms of qualifying, they won all their home games but only beat Sao Tome and Principe on the road, losing to second place Sudan and tying third place South Africa. Nevertheless, they finished first in the qualifying group, a point ahead of Sudan, who finished second.
Right, so they've met South Africa in their 2 most recent campaigns, and right now they await the draw, which is on January 26th, for the final round there, final round knockout.
Yeah,
And
for the
they
World
have
Cup.
a, yes, sorry?
Yeah, just for the World Cup.
Yeah, oh yeah, for the World Cup, and they have a 50-50 chance of making it, roughly. So let's move on. We're going to skip recent matches. They do have one friendly coming up. That is 2 days from now against Algeria. But otherwise, it's just been World Cup qualifying matches that they played recently. So we'll move on to a look at their players. So I'll just summarize their scorers over the last two campaigns. Andrew Ayew and Mohamed Kudus and Jordan Ayew each have 2 goals, 2 of their 9 goals. And Thomas Partey, Nicholas Opoku, and Baba Rahman each have 1. Jordan Ayew's goals were both scored on penalties. And in 2022, it is Andre Ayew again with 3 of their goals, one of which was on a penalty. Thomas Partey chipped in again, this time with 2 goals. And Mohamed Kudus again with 1 goal. And then a new scorer here, Mubarak Wakaso, who got 1 of their goals. So, any players jump out to you other than the Ayew brothers there, Connor?
Yeah, the Ayew brothers are the most notable, and they've scored a lot of goals combined for the Ghana national team. And yeah, they've been around for a while. In midfield, you mentioned Thomas Partey. He's really an anchor there. And Mubarak Wakaso, who got 1 of the goals in 2022 World Cup qualifying. He plays in China, but he has a lot of caps and experience for them as well. And then going to the defensive line, they have a trio of players who play in England. Daniel Amartey with Leicester, and then Baba Rahman and Andy Yiadom both play with Reading in the Championship. And another name worth mentioning there is Jonathan Mensah. He's a defender currently playing with the Columbus Crew in Major League Soccer, and he's been around the national team for a while.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, we're going to feature the Ayew brothers here. Andrew Ayew has just reached 100 caps, and he's the captain. Do you want to take that, or do you want me to take that?
Yeah, I'll start by talking about Andre Ayew. So he's the older of the 2 brothers, and as you said, captain in 100 caps, so a very important player for them. He's actually competing in his 8th African Cup with Ghana, and he's a regular starter for them across most of those, as well as in the World Cup 2014 and World Cup 2010. He started almost all their games in those 2 tournaments. And both Andre and Jordan, they're brothers, but their father was also a very popular and kind of legendary player. Do you want to talk a little bit about him?
Yeah, I don't actually know that much about him in terms of tournaments and games, but Abidi Pele is a very familiar name. I do know he won the African Cup at 17 years old in Libya. That was their 1982 win. So, he was a very popular player. And of course, when his sons emerged as national team players, I think they're very popular in Africa.
I guess I neglected to mention that Andre Ayew currently plays in Qatar with Al Sadd, but he's quite familiar to English fans, having played with having had 2 different spells with Swansea, and also playing for West Ham, and then he previously was with Marseille in France, so a pretty big team there.
Right. We always have a bit of a shine towards players who played in Wales. And actually, Jordan Ayew played in for Swansea too. Were they there at the same time? I don't really remember.
I don't believe it was the same time, but yes, they were both there. Jordan Ayew coming, I think, kind of in between the 2 spells that Andre was there.
Right. Okay, well, Jordan Ayew's history is fairly similar to his brother. He has fewer caps, but they were both part of the World Cup 2014 squad, and basically both starters for the national team. So I'm not sure we need to say a lot more about that. How about you, Connor?
Yeah, he hasn't competed in as many African Cups just because he's a bit younger. But he currently plays with Crystal Palace in England, having also played for Swansea, Aston Villa, and then, like his brother, Marseille in France as well.
Okay, cool. I just want to mention a few players who seem to be off the squad. Christian Atsu has 63 caps. He did play for Newcastle until recently, until earlier this year. He's now moved to Al Raid in Saudi Arabia. As I said, for Morocco, a lot of these guys still playing club football. But as far as the um, national team goes, he last played in 2019, I believe, there, because not all of the information I was looking for was there. Anyway, central defender John Boye, too, seems to be out of the picture. He has 70 caps. Kwado Asamoah is retired. 74 caps there, and perhaps one of the best known, at least national team players, Asamoah Gyan. He's the one who actually missed that penalty in 2010, actually refused to take penalties for the national team after that because he got so much abuse, I think, was the reason. Do you remember him, Connor?
Yeah, he played with Sunderland, for a good spell in England as well. But yeah, I do remember that penalty miss. Kind of unlucky to miss it
Oh,
in a
yeah.
sense and take all the fall. Um,
Yeah, that's right. He remained active for quite a while. He subbed into the 2019 African Cup, so I kind of wondered what had become of him and if he would be available for 2021. But it doesn't look like it. He's 36 years old now. Finally, Harrison Affle, 84 caps, who last played in 2018. So, like Morocco, a few players making their way out there. A bit of a golden generation, actually, in their case, retiring. Okay, shall we move on?
yes, let's start by talking about Gabon.
Up
Um,
on.
their nickname is the Panthers, and they're also known as the Brazilians, as much for their yellow and blue jerseys as anything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we go with Gabon. We'll start with an overview of their participation and achievements. So, their first international game was in 1960. So, they actually are an old team, although they don't seem as old as, say, teams like Ghana and Morocco. And you'll see the reason why right away here. They first entered World Cup qualification in 1966, but quickly withdrew as part of that African Asian boycott. But then they didn't enter in 1970 and they entered in 1974, but withdrew again. In short, they didn't enter the next three tournaments either. So 1990 was their first completed qualification. They entered the African Cup in 1972 and did complete that qualification. However, they either withdrew or did not enter four of the next five tournaments. But from 1984, they participated consistently. So, yes, they're an old team, but in fact, they missed a lot of the early competitions. Their local group is called UNIFAC. That's a Portuguese abbreviation of something that means the Central African Football Federations Union. So a Central African company, Central African country there. In terms of achievement, they have never reached the World Cup. Their best finish was in second place in the final group in 2010, where they finished 4 points behind Cameroon, who advanced to the Cup. They have reached the African Cup 6 times and made it as far as the quarterfinals in two of these. So that's a bit of an overview. Now we'll look a little more closely at the World Cup. 26 years after their first attempt to enter the World Cup, they first completed qualification in 1990. They failed to reach the final round in their first two completed entries in 1990 and 94, but they were competitive enough, especially at home where they won four of their five games. They reached their first final stage in 1998. I should say final stage of qualification there. But they earned only a single draw there and finished bottom of the group. 2002 saw them knocked out at the first stage by Madagascar, but from 2006 they've usually reached the final round. They were fourth of six in 2002. Fourth of six in 2006, going undefeated at home and finishing ahead of Algeria. And as we saw, they earned their best finish in 2010, where they finished second behind Cameroon. 2014, though, is a weak showing in that they didn't reach the final round there. Let's see how they've done over the two most recent cups.
So in 2018, they received a bye to round two as one of the top 27 teams in Africa. In the round two pairing, they faced a tough draw and were almost knocked out. But after each team won by a lone goal at home, they advanced on penalties over Mozambique. In the round three group stage, they were outdone by only group winners Morocco, who won twice. They otherwise exchanged away wins with Ivory Coast. Now that's kind of interesting. And then finished behind them in third, having drawn twice with Mali also. So they finished third of four and didn't qualify for the World Cup, of course.
Right.
In 2022, they received a bye in round one of three, which was a preliminary round. They were undefeated at home in the group stage, including tying group winner Egypt, but they lost all their games on the road. A scrappy battle among the bottom three sides saw them coming out ahead of Libya on goal difference and 2 points ahead of Angola to finish second in round two of three, but they're not moving on to the final playoff round.
Right, and that kind of good performance at home and weak performance on the road is a bit of a theme for Gabon, even though it was actually the opposite in 2018, where they did better on the road than at home. But usually it looks more like 2022, where they're strong at home and weak on the road. We're going to move on to the African Cup here, so let's begin with an overview. After a staggered start where they participated in just two of their first six tournaments, they were consistent from 1984, but were knocked out at the preliminary stage over the next three tournaments. Their first qualification for the African Cup was in 1994, having come close in two campaigns prior. They came close in the next two also, and finally reached the Cup in 1994. They did one better in 1996, not only qualifying, but passing the group stage. However, they dropped off after that and only qualified for one of the next six cups, getting knocked out at the group stage in 2002. They returned in 2010 and actually have been regular qualifiers since then, missing only in 2013. 2012 saw them hosting, or actually co-hosting, and passing the group stage for a second time. They hosted again in 2017, but Connor will take us through that a little bit later. We'll see whether hosting in 2017 gave them the advantage it did in 2012. But let's first take a deeper dive into their performance at the finals. Okay, 1994 to 2000 was a relatively good period, but it was defined more by their inability to reach cups before and after than by their actual performances in the cups. However, the 1994 berth was well deserved, having lost out on goal difference in both 1990 and 1992. In 1994, they went undefeated in qualification and in fact qualified over Cameroon. The cup, though, proved too much for them, and they lost heavily to both Egypt and Nigeria. Their quarterfinal finish in 1996 also is a bit of an illusory success. They finished first in a three-team group stage, but in fact were tied on points with Zaire and Liberia, taking first place only on a single goal difference. They lost 4-1 on penalties to Tunisia in the quarterfinals. 2010 began a more valid and sustained strong period. A good showing in 2010 World Cup qualification earned them automatic qualification for the 2010 African Cup, and they showed they deserved to be there by beating Cameroon in their opener and tying Tunisia in the next game. But they lost to Zambia in the last game and ended up in a three-way tie for top spot. Unfortunately, their goal difference placed them third, and they didn't advance from the group stage. As host in 2012, they also deserved, winning all of their group stage games over Niger, Morocco, and Tunisia. They looked to win in the quarterfinal over Mali too, but they allowed an equalizer at 85 and went out on penalties. 2015 saw them undefeated in qualification, winning all games at home and tying all games on the road to finish ahead of Burkina Faso, who they also beat in the first game of the 2015 Cup. But the promising run finished with losses to Congo and Equatorial Guinea, and they finished third behind both in the group stage. And we'll take a closer look at 2017 and 19. Over to you, Connor.
Sure. So starting with 2017, they were the hosts, as Kevin mentioned, so they qualified automatically for the tournament. However, they did join a group and went through kind of a mock qualification process. The purpose was to give the team playing experience and development, so all the games counted as friendlies. At the tournament, Gabon was disappointing first as a host, with technical problems such as poor fields and an unfinished stadium, little support from fans amidst political turmoil, and then their performance on top of that, which started with a draw against unfavored Guinea-Bissau and draws with Burkina Faso and Cameroon, saw them finish third in the group stage and failed to advance.
Yeah, not good for a home tournament there, which was actually kind of politically unpopular. Over to 2019.
Sure. In 2019, sorry, just give me a second here. So yeah, I'll talk about their qualifying. So they lost their opener away to Mali, and then had a draw with Burundi and a win against South Sudan. So they had one win, one draw, one loss after 3 games, and finished with 2 losses, 2 draws, and 2 losses. 2 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses. So it wasn't good enough to qualify. They finished third of the group behind Mali, who beat them twice, as well as Burundi, who they tied twice. So they were not making an appearance in 2019, but return here in 2021.
Right. So after a pretty consistent run of African Cups, not making the expanded cup in 2019 was a bit of a disappointment. But we'll soon look at 2021 and see if they were able to rectify that situation. We'll take a quick look at their local performance here, their local situation. And yeah. So they are part of a local group called the Central African Football Federations Union. UNIFAC is the Portuguese abbreviation. It has 8 members. The strongest 2 are Cameroon and Congo DR. They don't actually currently have a cup. They 4 times attempted to establish a cup, but with varying success. The last one was the best attempt. It's called the CFAC Cup, or it was called the CFAC Cup because it only ran from 2003 to 2014 with 10 editions, and they really haven't had a cup since then. But anyway, Gabon won it in 2013, and they came second in 2007, and they finished fairly regularly in the top 4 there. All right, let's move on to a kind of a summary of Gabon.
So Gabon are remarkable for their strong home performances, losing very rarely there. The strong period in the late 90s was a bit of an illusion and was predicated mostly on reaching the cup, which was a good achievement for them at the time. Ambitions can rise beyond that since, in recent times, and they regularly reach the cup as well as the final stage of World Cup qualifying. Reaching beyond the group stage in African Cup play would seem the next logical ambition for them.
Right. Well, it would, but failing to reach the African Cup in 2019 was a backward step as far as that ambition goes, especially so considering, as I said, that the Cup had been expanded to 24 teams. More than that, finishing behind Burundi made it quite disappointing. Recent campaign has been better, or recent campaigns, as we'll see soon, have been a bit better, but actually they don't really shed much light on their overall strength. What they do show is Gabon's particular strength at home and particular weakness on the road, at least over these two campaigns, and that would seem to work against them when we come to talk about tournament play. But let's take a look at 2021, or their qualifying for this tournament.
Well, true to form, they won all home games but managed only a single draw on the road, though it was against top seeded Congo DR, who surprisingly finished third. They exchanged home wins with surprise first place finisher Gambia, but also with bottom finishing Angola to finish second in the qualifying group.
Wow, Gambia winning the group! What a shock that was. Okay, once again, not much to talk about with their recent friendlies. Of course, most of them were World Cup qualifiers. They have scheduled a few friendlies. One on December 29th, just a few days ago, with Uganda was cancelled. And then one just yesterday, I believe, it's the third today, January 2nd, they took a bit of a beating at the hands of Burkina Faso at home, no less. So, what does that mean going into the Cup? And finally, they do have a friendly against Mauritania in Mauritania 2 days from now. Any comments on that, Connor?
No, not really. Let's take a look at some of their players.
Okay, let's do it. And I'll do a quick summary of the scorers in 2021 and 2022. So, surprisingly, it's not Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang who's their top scorer in 2021, although he did get 2 goals, as did Aaron Mupenza. But the top scorer was Dennis Bouanga with 3 goals. And then a favourite of ours, Connor, defender Bruno Manga.
Yeah, he spent a couple seasons at Cardiff City and really was one of my favorite players. He was particularly phenomenal in our ill-fated Premier League season, um,
Oh,
2018-19. So yeah, he's moved on now to Dijon in France, but really one of my favorite players.
right. I have a soft spot for him too. 2022, it was Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang who was among their top scorers. He got 2 goals, one on a penalty, but he was matched by Jim Alavina, who got 2 goals, and then single goals by Andre Biogo Poco, Axel Meye, and Alex Musunda. Um, but let's look at their roster here and see if there are any other players to point out, Connor.
Yeah, I'll just point to some more of the notable players. So Bruno Manga, he has 91 caps and 9 goals as a defender, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
So he's one of the anchors back there and one of the most experienced players. In midfield, they have Mario Lamina, who currently plays with Nice in France, but was with Southampton prior to that.
Right.
We'll talk about Aubameyang shortly, but then Dennis Bouanga, who's was a leading goal scorer in qualifying for this tournament. He plays with Saint Etienne in France and actually has a decent goal scoring record with them there.
Yeah, there are a lot of familiar names to me, I guess, because they've been in African Cups fairly regularly in the last decade. Lloyd Palun and Johan Obiang are both familiar defenders with quite a few caps. And maybe we should move on to our highlighted player.
Yeah, we want to talk about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who is, the clear star of the team, and is their captain. He's been with them since 2009 and has 71 caps in that time and 29 goals. He's been with Arsenal, of course, in England since 2018. And before that was with Borussia Dortmund in Germany, where he was, at the time where he was with them from 2013 to 2018, really one of the top strikers in Europe. He also was with Saint Etienne, where Buenga plays currently, and also had a spell with AC Milan. So he's played in four of the top leagues in Europe, and continues to be quite a feared striker.
Yeah, he seems to be having a bit of trouble with Arsenal right now. I think some disciplinary issues. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, that's right. And he was stripped as Arsenal captain. So that was kind of a big move. That's happened just in the last month. So he hasn't been playing as regularly for them. So perhaps, he's into his 30s now. Perhaps it's a bit of a decline from his peak form. But, as I said, on his day, he can be one of the best strikers around.
That's right, and actually, if he's not on the field for Arsenal, that may be a benefit for Gabon because he'll come in fresh. All right, well, we'll leave off there. We kind of couldn't help but choose Aubameyang as the feature player, although secretly I wanted to talk about Bruno Ecuel Manga, but we did. And just a couple of players too to mention. I guess Didier Ndong is still there. Yeah, he played 4 of their 8 games. I was actually going to focus on players who are off the team now, and the one that stands out is goalkeeper Didier Ovono, who had 104 caps and was the captain for a while. He did start in the 2017 African Cup, but he last played in March 2019. So a bit of a miss there because they don't really have a lot of experience among goalkeepers now. Finally, Aaron Apindangoye had 54 caps for the team, but hasn't played for them since 2019. Nevertheless, they seem to have a pretty good lineup there, Connor.
Yeah, they do. One of the teams with a lot of players playing in Europe, but at clubs kind of in a whole bunch of different countries.
Yeah.
Though particularly France, and many of their players were born there as well.
Right, that's right. Okay, well, we'll move on to our last team, Comoros. And this is honestly going to be shorter just because they fairly recently joined African Play, and also because they haven't really progressed much until recently. So their first international game. Oh, sorry. You gonna give us a nickname or any info for them?
Yeah, their nickname, as far as I can tell, is the coelacanths, which is kind of a prehistoric fish found in the waters around Comoros. So yeah, it's not the most probably it's not as feared as the panthers, perhaps, which is what Gabon is. But that's what we could
Yeah.
find.
Yeah, the fish, but I think that fish is only found in kind of those waters and not anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Cool. Their first international game was in 1979, but they took a while to join the fray, joining CAF, or the African region, in 2003 and FIFA in 2005. So they don't have long histories. Their first qualification run was in the 2010 World Cup. And even though they had joined CAF in 2003, their first African Cup was in 2012. They missed the 2013 version, but they participated steadily since there. Now, they are a part of COSAFA. That's the South African Regional Group, despite being out in the ocean there. They rarely participate in that in the COSAFA competition, and they seem to participate more in the Indian Ocean Island Games. They've never reached a cup competition, either World Cup or African Cup. In fact, the notion seemed a pipe dream until they surprised by reaching the 2021 African Cup.
Right. Well, I'll start by oh, sorry, I'll let you talk about the World Cup.
Right.
In summary.
Okay. Yeah, it's a pretty short summary. And first World Cup qualification in 2010, they lost both legs by 4-goal margins to Madagascar, and they were out equally quickly in 2014 at the hands of Mozambique. And I guess you're going to take us through the two most recent cups.
Yeah, so in 2018, they had a slightly more respectable showing. They tied higher ranker Lesotho in both legs of round one. And one on away goals. In round two, they had an impossible pairing against Ghana, who they meet here. But shockingly, they tied them in the first leg at home before ultimately losing 2-0 away.
Yeah, a good showing. And like a lot of African teams, even the small ones can be very strong at home and take points off of big teams. So I think in any other region, that tie with Ghana would be a shock, but in Africa, it's common enough. How about 2022 World Cup qualifying?
So Comoros were among the bottom 28 teams. So they were required to play in round 1 of 3, which was effectively a preliminary knockout round. Their FIFA ranking was 146th, and they met Togo, ranked 128th. They tied the first leg at home, but lost the away leg, so they were eliminated in the preliminary knockout round.
Right, again tying at home. Not such an uncommon thing in Africa. Let's take a look at the African Cup. Well, it's called the long history, but it's not long. It goes only from 2010. So, sorry, I've lost my place a little bit there. Okay, they took part in only 3 campaigns before 2017, and we'll look at the last 3. Connor will look at that in more detail. They were knocked out in preliminary rounds in 2010 and 2015. There was no preliminary round in 2012, so they were able to take part in a group stage. There they earned a home draw with Libya, but they lost all other games. But they did have one competitive game against each of the other teams, Zambia and Mozambique, where they lost only by a 1-goal margin. So not a terrible showing, but generally a very weak team. Let's take a look and see how they did in the 2017 African Cup.
So their only points in qualifying there were a home win over Botswana in the group stage, but they showed some competitive spirit with teams requiring late winners to beat them. This showed in the scorelines where they lost only 1 game by more than a single goal margin. Burkina Faso and Uganda were the other teams in the group, but they nevertheless finished last.
Right. And how about 2019?
So Comoros then were one of the 6 teams required to play a preliminary round. So just goes to show how low they were in the relative rankings in Africa. There they bested Mauritius in that round. In the group stage, they went undefeated at home, tying group winners Morocco and Cameroon and beating Malawi. However, they lost all on the road and finished last in the qualifying round behind Malawi on the away goals criteria.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It's not bad, and of course they meet Morocco here, who they took points off, but of course at home where they are stronger.
Yeah, that's a bit of a question I think we'll talk about in the discussion. But let's take a look at their local history. Oh, I kind of did already, didn't I?
Yeah, they don't really compete, of course, in that COSAFA group, so there's not a whole lot to say there.
Yeah, suffice to say, basically, even in those fairly weak regions, Kosafa being a bit stronger, but they were knocked out in the group stage every time that they entered, and they only entered about half the time. But in 2008, 2009, 2018, they were knocked out in the first round. In 2019, they did a bit better, reaching the quarterfinals. The Indian Ocean Games, I won't get into the description of it because it's a fairly long one. But they did well actually in the early days, 1979, 85, and 1990. They finished in the top four, as well as 2003. But in six other tournaments between 1993 and 2019, they were knocked out in the first round. In the first round of a very weak region on the whole. I think it includes Maldives from the Asian um, group there, but not very stiff competition. So let's take a look at 2021 before we kind of summarize there.
Sure. So they were Comoros were just two places above the bottom eight teams that had to undergo the preliminary round. Um, but they did end up getting a bye into the group stage. There they went undefeated at home, and their only loss in all their games was in their last game, a heavy 4-0 loss in Egypt, who finished first. But they bested third place Kenya and last place Togo, where they won away to finish second in their qualifying group. So a really incredible performance from them, finishing with 2 wins, 3 draws, and just that single loss to Egypt on the road.
Right, a very impressive run there. Okay, recent matches. They actually did not play World Cup qualifiers because they were knocked out in the preliminaries there. So they've had a few friendlies. We'll just look at the most recent two, though. In November, they played Sierra Leone, and they actually won away there. But then in just a couple of days ago, on the last day of 2021, they played Malawi, and they lost. They lost at home to Malawi. So that's not a good result going in. We'll take a look at the scorers. They don't have many of them because they didn't score many goals. They scored 4 in 2021, all scored by different players. So Faiz Salimani, Yusuf Umchangama, who we're going to feature here, El Fardu Bel Nabuhain, and Faiz Matwar, each scoring one of their goals. And in 2022, it was a different scorer. It was Ibrahim Yusuf Judah, who got their only goal of qualifying again. They didn't pass the qualifying or the preliminary round there. So let's take a look at their squad and any patterns that you see, Connor.
There's no names that stand out, kind of unsurprisingly, but a lot of their players do play abroad, mostly in France. However, you're looking at some of the lower leagues in France. With rare except, well, I don't think any of their players play in the top flight. Some lower leagues there, as well as a couple other clubs, including in Romania, Belgium, Netherlands. But again, they tend to be slightly lower league.
Yeah, I don't see any kind of top clubs there. But, like Ajaccio in France and Auxerre in France, they're pretty respectable clubs.
Yeah.
And I have a bit of a theory here, Connor. I wonder, given that their improvement over the last little while, I mean, very recent improvement, whether they did kind of what Curacao did in the North American zone, or, in the Central American, in CONCACAF, whether they kind of recruited a bunch of players there.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting theory. I think some small island countries or smaller countries in general have done that. So, it's not a bad strategy.
Yeah.
So, quite possible.
Yeah, I can't remember because I did up their players quite a while ago, but I do believe a lot of them were actually born in France. So it may have been kind of recruiting these players with some heritage in Comoros, as Curacao did in
Yeah.
the Netherlands, mostly them.
Well, we'll
Uh,
talk
Yeah, go
briefly
ahead.
about Youssef Mchangama. He plays for Guingamp in France. That's a second League Two team in France, so second tier. So again, a bit more of a respectable club. Um, he's been with Comoros since 2010 and has 43 caps and 9 goals, which is not a bad return playing in midfield. Obviously, there's no prior major tournament participation because this is the first tournament Comoros, Comoros has qualified for. But he'll probably be one of the more influential players and someone to keep an eye out for in this tournament.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, 43 caps since 2010 is pretty impressive. He's pretty much been there for their whole history. And there are really no players with many more than 20 caps because, um, as in 2022, they didn't pass the preliminary round, so they don't play those 6 or 8 games of competition. So they haven't played a lot of games as a national team. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the team by team overview. And so now we're going to look at them together, starting with the rankings. Go ahead, Connor.
All right. So Morocco are 28th in FIFA rankings and 31st in ELO. And that puts them as a second ranked team overall in Africa, according to both systems. Ghana are somewhat behind in 52nd in FIFA and 62nd in ELO. So that puts them as the 8th or 10th best team in Africa, according to the ranking system. So again, somewhat behind Morocco. Gabon, who are the pot 3 team, they're 89th and 98th, which is good for 19th overall in Africa, according to both systems. And then Tiny Comoros are 132nd according to the FIFA rankings and 145th according to ELO. So they're near the bottom. They're 38th in Africa in the FIFA system and 47th in ELO. So in a way that underscores the scale of their achievement. This is a team that, for many years was ranked below 150th and even 200th a decade ago. So it's a good rise and a great achievement for them to be in this tournament.
Yeah, just a couple of observations there. I mean, when we were summarizing Ghana, I did say that they had dropped from the mid 20s down to down to 52nd here in the FIFA rankings, and same also in the ELO rankings, where they've actually dropped down to below 60. Inversely, Morocco has done the opposite. They were about 70th, almost 80th in 2014. And they've risen up to 28th. So they've kind of jumped up in the last couple of years. And of course, you said with Comoros too, they were 200th, which is like the lowest in the world almost. In about 2011, moved up to about 180th by 2015, and then a big jump up to above 150 in both systems there. So pretty amazing. Nevertheless, there remains still quite a big difference in their African ranking between FIFA and ELO. FIFA seems to, well, they definitely favor more recent games than ELO. So they've risen up to 38th in FIFA, which I'm not sure I agree with, and 47th in Africa, which, as you say, is still near the bottom there.
Yeah, the FIFA rankings do take a more short-term approach. So, given that they were a very weak team up until 2017 and have improved a bit since then, it's kind of no surprise that that's being reflected more in FIFA rankings than ELO.
Yeah, but yeah, that's right. But there has been kind of a sudden rise in Elo nonetheless, and that's justified by what we saw. Do you want to talk about the odds, or do you want me to do that?
I'll let you go through that.
Okay, it's just a kind of another perspective on the team. So this is just from one website, which gives outright odds, which means their chances of winning the whole tournament. So even though Morocco, we just saw, were ranked second in both systems, they're actually ranked seventh, the seventh most likely team to win here. And Ghana is not far behind them as the ninth most likely. Gabon as the 13th most likely. And surprising for me, given that there are 24 teams, Comoros is ranked 18 despite their weak pass. What do you make of it, Connor?
That's higher than I would have expected. Um, yeah, certainly some of the teams that ranked above include Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, Malawi. So
You mean below?
below them, yeah,
Yeah.
below Comoros. So I'd probably put them a little bit lower, but I think the main point is even at 18th most likely, it's still extremely unlikely that they'll win the tournament.
Yeah.
According to the
Okay.
odds
Well, it
makers.
sounds like you're itching to get to the discussion, but we're going to do one more thing before we do, and that's the head-to-head record here. So I'll just go through it quickly. Morocco and Ghana. Uh, Morocco has a slightly better record with 4 wins, 3 draws, and 2 ties over their 9 competitive games. That's fewer games than I would imagine, both being old teams. But anyway, they last played in 2008, so maybe that kind of explains the small number of games. Morocco and Gabon have played more actually, and it's very interesting. Their record is five. Their record is even. Each have won 5, and then they have 1 draw between them. And they most recently played in 2018, where Morocco bested Gabon. So maybe a slight edge in recent times. And Morocco have played Comoros. We saw that Comoros have actually taken points from some big teams, and one of them is Morocco. We saw when Connor described it that they had tied in, I guess, in Comoros there. So Morocco enjoys a 1 win, 1 draw, and 0 loss advantage there. Ghana and Gabon have played 6 times, most recently in 2010. And Ghana has the advantage with 3 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. Ghana and Comoros have also played, as we saw in 2018 World Cup play. And again, Comoros tied them at home, but Ghana won away. Sorry. And finally, Gabon and Comoros have never met. So, excuse me. Why don't you take us away on a bit of a discussion there, Connor?
All right. Well, Morocco and Ghana, as we saw in the world rankings, Morocco, has the edge, but the odds makers put Morocco and Ghana a little bit closer together, and I tend to agree with the odds makers. I think Morocco and Ghana will be, pretty competitive in a fight for first place, even though Morocco are the seeded team, and I know Morocco has a slightly better record over Ghana head to head, but that they haven't met recently. And then
Yeah,
Ghana.
if I could just jump in there, or do you mind?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know why Morocco is rated second by the ranking systems here. If we look back, we saw that they had a very flat period for most of the last decade, and even though they did pick it up at the end, they haven't done. They haven't. I mean, second place would mean that they would reach the finals, and they haven't come close. Whereas Ghana has.
Yeah, and Ghana has done very well in the African Cup. They regularly get to the last 4. Um, so yeah, I view it as closer, and even in kind of prospect for the tournament overall, I view them as kind of equally likely to go to go far in the tournament. I don't really give Morocco the edge that the ranking systems do. By the way, Morocco is second in the FIFA rankings, just behind Senegal. So yeah, I'm a little bit surprised with that.
Yeah.
In terms of Gabon and Comoros, they do seem quite clearly, to me at least, to be the third and fourth team in this group. Comoros can pick up points, but it's mostly at home. And this being their first tournament, I think they'll be out of their depth in this group. As for Gabon, they should beat Comoros. Whether they'll be able to challenge for Morocco and Ghana, I'm not so sure. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think Gabon is a pretty good team, and but the problem with them and with Comoros is that they do very well at home and poorly on the road. So that makes me wonder how they're going to perform in a cup. And Gabon has passed the group stage twice, but I think a bit weaker in the cups than in qualification runs.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
they have some good players individually, as we mentioned, and of course, Aubameyang, is a top player if he's on form. I mean, he's been a bit out of form and out of sorts with Arsenal, but he gives them of course, the opportunity to kind of win any game or steal a late goal or something like that, even against Morocco or Ghana. But overall, they don't have the same tournament pedigree that the other teams do, and
Yeah,
and as well the results and performances both in qualifying for this tournament and the World Cup. So I give Morocco and Ghana the edge for sure.
yeah, definitely. One thing I was going to add to what you said, like the maturity of their players, maybe enough to overcome that uh, home away kind of problem that they have. Since a lot of them do play abroad, it may not be as big a factor as it is. I think it'll be a bigger factor for Comoros, who knows, because a lot of their players come from France. But um, there is a bit of a recency bias, I guess, is the way I would put it, to Morocco being so much favored over Ghana. I completely agree with you that I I see them as fairly even here. I mean, it definitely is true that Morocco has a bit more momentum than Ghana coming in. But I do think it's possible that Ghana could steal first from Morocco here, who are often kind of flat in the group stages of African Cups. What do you think of the chances of new teams like Comoros being highly motivated and really performing out of their skins the way, say, Madagascar, Benin, and Mauritania did in the last one?
Well, it certainly happens in Africa. I mean, that's what's exciting. I mean, I hesitate to write off any team, um, especially a team that perhaps comes in a bit unknown that can perhaps work in their advantage, as it has with some of the other teams you mentioned. Overall, I think in terms of the quality of player they have, I think it's unlikely, but they shouldn't be completely written off. I mean, they've done well to reach this tournament and do well in their qualifying group. Well enough to be considered among the top 24 teams in Africa for this tournament. So I think points are unlikely, but we've seen it happen before in Africa. So, it's possible that they could pull off some sort of surprise, but I think a bit unlucky for them, the strength of the group they got.
I agree. I think as a third place team, Gabon is pretty stiff competition, and there were teams in pot three that Comoros would have a better chance of maybe taking a draw off or something like that. But even though teams like Comoros can kind of pop up in these cups and do very well, we wouldn't sit here kind of predicting it because the the whole point is it's a bit of a shock when it happens. Okay, Connor. Well, I think you've danced around it enough. How is this group going to end?
I think it'll be a close battle for first, and Ghana and Morocco may end up tied on points, but I'm going to give the edge to pot two team Ghana. I think they'll be the ones to top the group. ahead of Morocco. And then I think Gabon third, possible if they, for them to advance as one of the top 4 third place teams if they beat Comoros and perhaps, use goal difference to their advantage. But I think third is realistic for Gabon. And then I don't really see anything other than last place for Comoros. But, hopefully they can pull off a shock, which might be getting a point off someone else in this group.
Yeah, you've given exactly the answer I would give. Just a couple of things I would say is that, Morocco and Ghana are both a bit hot and cold. So there is a bit of a chance that one of them will either really excel or underperform. I think that's possible, but I agree with your assessment there. I put those two kind of evenly up at the top. Gabon, I think there's a bit of a chance of them upsetting, and who knows, like the game against Gabon might be the thing that influences who finishes on top. But honestly, I feel like Comoros, the FIFA rankings we looked at and the head-to-head, I think vastly overrate them. I would actually put them in the bottom 3 in terms of chances of in this tournament. I think they did really well to reach it, but I don't think they're going to do very well now that they're here. Before we go, just let's take a quick look at what do you think these teams' chances are beyond the group stage?
Yeah, I think if Gabon got out of the group stage, that's as far as they could go. I wouldn't see them passing beyond the round of 16. I mean, Comoros, I don't see them getting there, but it'd be a real shock if they did get out of this group.
Yeah.
For Morocco and Ghana, I think these are two teams that will be looking at semifinals at least. It might depend who they get, and perhaps finishing first in the group will become quite important because the second place team could end up facing a much stronger team than the group winner. So I think it's worth winning this group, and I think teams will be, both Morocco and Ghana, despite being a bit hot and cold, will be motivated to do well at the group stage. I don't really see these teams as kind of one of the favorites to win the tournament, but I think semifinals would be a good performance for both of them.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think both of them are in a bit of rebuilding. We saw that Morocco has lost a lot of players, which might be for the better, for all we know. And Ghana, it seems to be kind of a golden generation on the way out a little bit. So it might come down to how good are the players coming in. And I think that will make them a little bit volatile. But I really agree with you that round of 16, they should pass. Semi-finals would be beyond expectations. So I see both of these as kind of quarterfinal teams. And totally with you on Gabon. Passing the group stage would be great, but I don't think they would get more than a step beyond the group stage.
All right.
Well, great talking to you. Do you want to take us out there, Connor?
Yeah, so as always, you can find this and all our other podcasts available on our website, which is Soccer Files. That's Soccer Files with a PH, .captivate.fm. And you can also email us any comments, questions, or feedback you may have at soccerfiles@gmail.com.
All right, and we'll be back with Group D within a day or two. And thanks very much for listening.
Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next time, Kevin.
Okay, good talking to you, Connor. Bye-bye.